Most of the time, despite being on the autism spectrum, I don't feel that unusual. I mean, I've been me my entire life. I start to notice a difference between myself and others when I'm around larger groups of people. That's when I start to see a contrast between their behaviors and reactions to our shared surroundings and mine. It's more like I don't understand their behavior with respect to what's going on around us. So in that way, it sort of feels like they're the ones who have something wrong with them, not me. It's like it's their fault. It's their irrational or incomprehensible behavior that's making me feel alienated. Hello friends, welcome to Mr. Snayl's Wild Ride. I am Mr. Snayl and the wild ride is my life so far. I recently spent 4 days at a convention out of town around hundreds of neurotypical people. Well, it was actually more like 8,000 of them, but I wasn't around all 8,000 at the same time, so it really only felt like hundreds. From a meta perspective, the entire trip went really well. I mean, even better than I'd expected. Our planning ahead really worked out for us. We figured out our schedule a few days in advance. That was good. Through no planning on our part, our hotel actually turned out to be right across the street from a drugstore, and that was extremely convenient for stuff that we either didn't or couldn't bring, like beverages or snacks, things like that. I'm very happy to say that a lot of the prep that we did for this particular trip really paid off. So that's my follow-up report for all those videos where I was freaking out. Now that doesn't mean that I'm not going to start freaking out all over again at the end of June when I've got a trip coming to VidCon, but one hurdle at a time. Now that said, there's one particular experience that I want to talk about. Our hotel room was on the 5th floor, and right outside the elevator bank there was this particular bay window that overlooked the pool, which was sort of a hub of activity that whole weekend. The hotel itself comprised these 3 separate towers of rooms, and the pool area was sort of like a traffic circle. The layout actually reminded me of one of the freshman dorms from my undergrad called the Towers. Anyway, multiple times a day I would look out that window down at the pool area, and I felt like I was watching some kind of experimental colony from an observation deck or something. And every time I was looking down there, it forced me to think about how very different I was from all of those people that I was looking at. And now it's not that I didn't have that experience while I was down there among those people, but amidst all those bodies, I was grappling with some very immediate situations, like trying to not bump into people and trying to not bump into things and trying to figure out where we were headed to next and being overwhelmed by the noise and the temperature and the fact that everybody was 1,000 years younger than I was, and on and on and on. Now, most of the time, I'm just me. Like I said, I'm the only me that I've ever known. I admit that I've never been especially happy with myself, just due to sort of a general dissatisfaction with my situation or, a byproduct of depression or some combination of the two. Aside from that, once in a while, and this convention was definitely one of those times, I would have given anything to have been neurotypical. Anything. There's a difference between feeling like you don't fit in and feeling like there's no place for me anywhere. It's like I'm not supposed to be here, not just at the convention, but like on this planet in the first place. I'm not trying to be melodramatic. There's a reason that so many people with Asperger's syndrome so closely identify with Mr. Spock or Lieutenant Data. They're not from this planet. I've only ever heard one metaphor that really effectively describes the disconnect between autistic understanding and neurotypical understanding, that it's a cultural difference. If you're from a westernized culture like the United States of America, try to imagine a guy that grew up, born and raised in an Eastern culture like Japan or Saudi Arabia. Lived there his whole life, speaks some English. Let's just call him Mohammed. That's the most popular male name in the entire world. More than 15 million people have that name. So Mohammed comes to the US alone to stay permanently. And you become his best friend or his roommate or his spouse. Okay, so if we accept that premise, the two of you are together a lot. And neither of you know very much about each other's culture at all, but you care a great deal about each other, so there's an investment there. So you're constantly having to explain how to do everything, how to shop for groceries, appropriate behavior at parties, what parties are about, everything. And Mohammed now, he's not just a blank slate who's come here and is like, show me how to do things. He's come with a bunch of preconceived behaviors and cultural values of his own. A lot of what you think makes perfect sense here doesn't make any sense to him at all. Some of it he maybe even finds downright offensive. In fact, I guarantee that there's some things that he finds downright offensive. So you're trying to get him to like unlearn a bunch of stuff that he's known and done his whole life. But there's some of these behaviors and practices that he's going to hold on to. He's just not going to let them go because your way is just too weird or gross or just downright crazy for him to have any reason to give it up. So you're just going to have to find a way to let him do what he's going to do. And the obverse is true too, you know. You're happy to make some concessions because you care about this guy. You're not just going to start doing everything his way, you know, around the house or apartment or whatever, no matter how much it means to him or how much he means to you. You just can't. Now, I don't always feel as strongly displaced as I've just described, but this sense of being an expatriate, whether from a distant country or a distant planet, you know, it's always there at some level. So in this example, neither you nor Mohammed are wrong. They're just cultural differences. The only time that issues arise are when you're negotiating the back and forth and give and take, and that's true in any relationship, really. You know, whether it's a friendship or a working relationship or a marriage or whatever. The neurotypicals in their behavior, they're not wrong. And my confusion, you know, because of my perspective, isn't wrong. We're just different. A very trying, very taxing kind of different, but still. It feels like everything about that convention, maybe even my whole life, would have just been so much easier and so much more fun if I could just be neurotypical, even if it was just temporary. Now, I am fully aware that this kind of talk sounds like it runs afoul of the entire neurodiversity movement. Don't confuse my own personal socialization struggles with any sort of belief that autism is some sort of condition that needs a cure. It isn't. It's a neurological difference, that's all. It's a stable state. It's not some kind of progressive disease, and I'm not looking for some sort of antidote to it. But it isn't easy. And sometimes I'd like a break. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week. For all those videos where I was totally freaking out about this trip to... I'm sorry I have to take this. It feels like everything about that whole conversation. Sorry. Imagine a guy that grew up in some Eastern company.